Hey, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you're tuning in, whenever you're watching this. Welcome to another episode of A Stronger Futures Project, where what we discover, what we explore is what you don't know about what you don't know, and also discovering the joy along the journey. And today we're going to talk about just that. It is finding meaning in the struggle. And there's no one that's exempt from it. Doesn't matter the demographic, doesn't matter the race or religion or your identity, it doesn't matter anything. We all go through a struggle, and finding meaning in that is what makes the difference between success and the verge of success. And I say it that way because we're so close, we're closer than we think so often. And as we dive into this, we're going to explore this and also talk about some examples and what we can do to enjoy this journey. And even though there are parts of our country that are faced right now with storms, it is finding the beauty in that. Material can be replaced, people cannot. So my heart goes out to those that are in that position. But today, let's focus on that, finding the meaning in the struggle. So, Tracy, I'm glad to have you here today with me and appreciate you. So, what's your thought on this topic?
I mean, it's really interesting. Like personally, it makes me recall my grief journey, and I had like a whole punch. I had like four grief scenarios happen to me within the span of like 18 months, and so I had, and before that, the only grief scenario I had was my dog passing away when I was a kid, which I did not experience as the same thing. That is not to say that when people lose pets that it is not meaningful to them. Just for me at the time, it wasn't as such. But one of the greatest things that someone told me in that scenario was that grief was not about making the sea calm, but it was about learning how to ride the waves.
Hmm.
And one of the things, like when I think about finding meaning in the struggle, I had to learn how I deal with grief and how I process that and how I move through it and how I grow around it. And there were so many beautiful moments and relationships that came out of that struggle that I would absolutely not change in the world. And it reminds me that that's why we do that. And we can't prevent struggle. It's not something we can control. It's almost always external to us. But there is and I believe this, and there's just, I was in a conversation earlier and we were talking about Pollyanna, and I don't know how, if everybody knows Pollyanna anymore because it's a pretty old movie, but she played the glad game. And like she could find a way to make everything glad until she couldn't. And then she had to develop that skill over again. And in my experience, I have always had a gift that was associated with struggle, whether that's I can be more compassionate with another person, I can understand myself better, I have a new level of self awareness, whatever it is, that there is a gift. And that when we look at struggle that way, kind of knowing, like really embodying the fact that there is a gift. We might not see it yet, or we might not know what it is, but there's a gift somewhere. I think it allows us to build a new relationship with struggle.
Yeah, the idea is that there is a gift in each of our struggles, and and I say it like this: is that there is no surprise to God. And so when he created you, he knew what you were going to go through before you knew you were going to go through it. This is my belief. And as I understand that he did not prepare me inept, not having the materials that I need, not having the strength that I need. I just have to excavate that strength. And I have never had a baby, and I'm thankful. I'm thankful that that is a gift given to women. And it is in that, from my observation of that experience, is that that pain that you go through immediately, when that child is placed in your hands, that pain is forgotten.
I always, so I have had a
Yes.
baby. And it's so I actually I had a really difficult pregnancy as well. I was sick for most of the time. I like everyone wants to make you choose things all the time because you're the pregnant one, right? So friends, maybe just ask your pregnant friends if they want to make all the decisions because sometimes it's really frustrating. Um, but I did not enjoy. I did not enjoy it, and I know there's people who do. Um, and I remember saying to myself, like, the gift of that baby has to outweigh all of this because there's no way anyone would have more than one kid
Right.
if that wasn't true. And so and it's true, right? Like I was in labor for 15 hours. It was way worse than my mom said that it was going to be. It reset my pain scale. I thought tearing my ACL was a 10 on my pain scale until I had a baby, and then now it's like a 7. um, and I just have, my body is not very good at handling pain. It makes me nauseous. And then a whole bunch of other stuff happens from that. But the thing, it is a thing. It's just like, and then there's this baby, and there's this like, I think maybe it's a hormone like neural blocker to some degree that's like, don't worry about that. That's gone. Like you have this baby and you have to take care of it and you have to keep it alive. And so you have to focus on this. It's kind of incredible how that struggle, which is actually like a 9-month struggle for a lot of us, just is like, oh, here it is. Here's the result of that struggle. And there's so much meaning in it. And then there's a whole bunch of other different struggles that we have as parents that also have a lot of meaning. But it is a good example, especially for people who might be listening who have had a baby, because I think most of us have experienced that or very minimally experienced a like detachment from the pain. So if we consider the pain the struggle, that immediately after there's a detachment from it, right? Like, oh, that struggle is past and now it's done. Which is interesting too, Stanley, because I think there are, like when you think about a pregnancy manifests in a baby, if you're lucky. There's lots of scenarios where that doesn't actually end up happening. But there's like an end, right? Like you have the baby and that is done, right? The struggle of being pregnant in that pregnancy is complete, right? The struggle ends. But I think a lot of times in other parts of our lives, grief being a good example, is that there isn't really an end state of that. And so I feel like maybe it is a little bit different dealing with this concept of finding meaning in struggle if the struggle feels ongoing versus we know at some point in the future the struggle is going to stop. If I have like a broken, like I'm an athlete, so I've had lots of broken bones, but I have a cast on my wrist, and eventually that bone is going to heal. I'm not going to have a cast on my wrist. So while it might be a struggle to write right now, I remember writing a French test with my cast, and I was like, this isn't even legible. I need to do an oral test. But that will end. My brain knows that there's an end date associated with that. But with a lot of our struggles, that's not true. So what are your thoughts on finding meaning when the struggle seems ongoing?
Well, I believe that nothing has any meaning except the meaning that we give it.
True.
Okay, so, and I can say it in this way that I grew up in poverty, but I did not create a definition of my life as being a poverty person. It was an experience. And when I say poverty, and I joke about it, but I say that we were so poor. We lived in this apartment, and there were 3 people, 3 different tenants. We had a full prostitution house across the hall, 10 feet away from my door. we had gypsies that lived in the below, and they had chickens that ran around, and we had the town drunk that lived in the other apartment down below us. And Charlie would always be laying face down every Friday night, Saturday morning, and Sunday morning, and his door to his Chevy was always open. Now, as I looked at that, I saw that this was not a favorable condition. Now, you can have this in your work. You can be dressed up in an Armani suit if that's really the thing anymore. I don't know what the fanciest suit was. So I'm dating myself. There's probably something like Armani probably isn't even in existence anymore. But I'm
It
just
is
dating
in
myself.
existence. I
It
don't
is
know
okay.
its level
Okay.
of popularity,
So,
but I get your reference.
yeah. So I heard recently that Rolex is no longer the watch to have. It's like dropped off the watch chart. There's another watch that has replaced it. So, you see, I don't wear one anyway, but
Me neither.
it is learning in that struggle and seeing what is it that I can become. And I stole clothes out of Goodwill boxes, and I rummaged through dumpsters to bring home food as a little kid. And I'd bring home cans that had no labels on it. It was like whatever anybody's guess was in there. We didn't know what was in there. Just took the can opener and opened it and discovered. And it's amazing that I didn't get poisoning or start barking because I don't know what the heck I was eating.
I was gonna say, I was like, unlabeled can could be dog food.
Yeah. So the thing of it is that those struggles, those obstacles, those difficulties, those trials, they create the making of a character. And I say that we whatever meaning we give it, for some people, a loss is a loss and they can't recover from it. For other people, they say a loss is what can I learn?
Mm-hmm.
And this is what I really, really engage to do each day. And there's times when things don't turn out the way that I wanted them to, investments don't turn out the way that I had anticipated. But I'm looking at it and I'm going, what did I learn through that experience? And how can I also help other people in my business, in coaching and developing, so that I can not only empathize, but make something out of what appears to be nothing, but as actually the ingredients for something even more than I could imagine.
So is that, I mean, feel like it makes it sound simple to say just mindset, because there's lots of things that contribute to our mindsets. Is it just a switch? Because when you're talking about building character, what that says to me is, so there's this book by Donald Miller called Build a Story Brand. And it's specifically about marketing and how to optimize your customer journey with your brand narrative. But so much of that is based on the storytelling concept of a hero's journey. And a hero, by nature, has to go through a struggle.
Yeah.
And I always think that Star Wars is the best example of this. You might have your own best example, but Star Wars isn't a good movie because Luke Skywalker didn't have any challenges or trauma or any of those things, right? The making of the journey and the success in building that character is based on the presence of struggle. And I think a lot of us will sit and we'll watch a TV show or a movie or read a book, and we will go on the journey with that person, and we'll be right in it, and we're cheering for them because we want them to succeed. And we forget that we're that person. So how could we cheer for ourselves? How can we create that mindset of that? One, no struggle is permanent, right? This is how many times, I'm 40 right now while we're having this conversation, and I don't even know how many versions of my life I would say have existed so far in terms of my identity. At least 5, probably more. But all of those struggles expired at some point. And and they're replaced with new struggles, absolutely. But that's the process, that's the journey, and we go
Mhm.
along it, and we can act like the hero and believe that these struggles are teaching us the skills it's going to take to get to our happy ending, to our success, or we can get stuck in the struggle and have it feel empty. I feel like that's a decision. Right? That's a decision that we make, but there's also a lot of people who don't make that decision. So then I'm wondering, like, what again, it's probably a whole variety and lots of different things, but what are the things that keep people stuck in the victimization of the struggle? Like, this is just my struggle and it will be my struggle,
Right.
instead of moving to the next stage, which is looking for the meaning.
Yeah. So our heroes are our heroes, and this is my belief is that our heroes are our heroes because we see something inside of them that we see inside of us. And my superhero is Batman. And the reason that Batman is my superhero is because he's the only superhero that doesn't have a superpower. Everybody else, I mean, Spider-Man has webs that come out of his wrist. Aquaman can swim through water faster than, the fastest water creature. Wonder Woman, she can dodge bullets and she can fly and do all kinds of things. Yeah, yeah. And all these superheroes, they have a superpower. The Iron Man turns into iron, and the Rock Man turns into a rock, and they do amazing things. Superman can fly and stop a speeding bullet, you know. But Batman gets inaugurated by the loss of his parents, and he didn't ask for that. And he grows up in kind of a seclusion under the housekeeper. And the housekeeper is a very creative person and starts to make these toys. And that's where Batman becomes like, he sees what the plight of the community around him. He couldn't just take his wealth and just live happily ever after. His struggle was to see the crime that was rising up in Gotham City. And he said, I can't stand by and be a contributor to this. I'm going to do something about it. And I'm going to take the thing that scared me, the bats, when he fell into the well, and he
Spoiler
used,
alert for anybody who hasn't seen Batman, but if you haven't seen Batman, then that's weird.
yeah. So yeah, spoiler alert. So it is understanding the thing that creates the fear is the thing that creates the formidability. We need a formidable opponent. And having that formidable opponent, I mean, look, Rocky is one of the iconic movies of the 70s. And it's not because he won. It's because he represented each one of us that have gotten the invitation to an opportunity and got the hell beat out of us. And yet people didn't love Cassius Clay, or they didn't love Apollo Creed. And people did love Cassius Clay because he fought the system, and they stripped him of his title. And this is what made us navigate and gravitate towards him. So when we look at Apollo Creed, he invited this wannabe nobody and gave him an opportunity, and he couldn't really beat him. He didn't really win. Rocky won, and he won the hearts of those that were watching. And as we see ourselves in that struggle, we see ourselves in that invitation, and we see ourselves maybe getting fired, maybe losing the relationship, maybe losing the house, or going bankrupt. And we can either allow it to define us, or we can define it and say, okay, what did I learn through that? and taking the greatest things that cause us fear and turn them into a platform. And this is what I venture to help people do is you're at a crossroads and you have a decision that you can make. You can say yes to you, or you can say yes to everybody else.
Well, and I think this is your struggle is your struggle, right? My struggle is my struggle. It's not better or worse,
Right.
or it's different, right? We all have different struggles. And I remember my friend Kira Day telling me the story about a dog sitting on a nail, which sounds very uncomfortable. And apparently in the story, dogs can talk. Just go with it. But then being asked, like, why are you sitting there on that nail? That looks like it hurts. And just being, it doesn't hurt enough for the dog to move.
Right.
And I think this is the thing too about, it becomes easy to make an assumption about someone else's struggle, because at that point in my struggle, I wanted to move. But maybe I'm just going to make all the nerd references today. Go with it, everybody. My foot stepping on a nail might feel different than a hobbit's foot stepping on a nail, right? It might be really painful for me and I might want to do something about that. And the hobbit might not want to because it doesn't notice. But then it also becomes really easy for me.
Somehow I lost connection with my co-host. So hopefully she joins us back in here momentarily. I'm not sure what happened, but this is part of the experience with technology, is that we get this opportunity to share stories and to share experiences. And it'd be easy to say, oh gosh, I'm just going to stop the podcast, or I'm going to stop the live and throw the towel in, throw the baby in with the bathwater, or throw the baby out with the bathwater. But this is an opportunity to just call us in a moment's notice, because this is what happens so often, is that sometimes life brings us these struggles, brings us these challenges that we're not prepared for. This is not rehearsed. I didn't kick her out. And what do we do with it? When we look at other people that have also faced struggles and trials, and some of our greatest heroes, and I'm going to use Michael Jordan, and really what I want to do is I don't want to focus so much on just Michael, but I want to focus on his identity and what he chose to do. Michael's one person that he was cut from his high school basketball team. Can you imagine being cut from the high school basketball team? Well, as I did greater research on that, it wasn't because Michael wasn't talented, but the coach cut him because he had an attitude, and he wanted to refine the character in Michael. And he gave him an ultimatum, and he gave him the requirement to be able to play on the team the following year. And that was to show up at practice, not miss anything, to show up and do what he was asked to do. And so as he did that, and he showed up like he was asked to do, then he became one of the greatest basketball players in our time. And we can look at Michael Jordan, and I'm just talking about a story, and you got disconnected. I don't know if the battery shut down, or it looks like you're on a different device.
Yeah, my computer died. So,
okay. So I was just sharing that was an experience that wasn't planned. And it was great. I mean, I don't think we could have orchestrated that any better, right? Because this is sometimes what happens to us in life.
Struggle.
We're going along in this, hey, this is just how things go. And then all of a sudden the power shuts off, or we get disconnected. And it's like we scramble, and it's like, oh my gosh, now what do I do? And how does this stuff happen? And it's when we can navigate through that And what I was doing, I was finishing up with kind of a story about Michael Jordan. And the idea was that he wasn't cut because he wasn't talented. He was cut because he had an attitude. And the coach saw more for the team as a whole than what Michael Jordan's attitude would have brought. And I've talked to other coaches, and I've been a coach myself in sports, and I've had to get rid of a key player because they were a bad apple. And I've had employees that were key, they were great, but they were toxic. So getting rid of them hurt in the short term, but in the long term, it brought about greater success. My reputation was more important than keeping somebody that could perform but had a bad attitude. So that's where I was at with that. And I don't know where you were at on it was kind of took me off course, so I just went with the flow. And it's just beauty. It's just a way that things come together in such a way.
Well, and I think technology adds another level of complexity, right? But the concept I think we can talk about is, like you're talking about, attitudes, right? Like, if we are stressed out by a technological issue, like we can be, and it would be probably pretty normal, pretty acceptable, pretty common for somebody to get stressed out by that and to lose their train of thought. And honestly, I don't remember what I was talking about before because I'm trying to find a solution, but I don't feel stressed about it, right? That was when there's this experience of, this is what was meant to happen today.
Right.
And I might not understand in this moment how that is supposed to get me to my destination, but I have faith to the degree that I don't allow myself, one, I can't go back in time. I can't make my computer not die, right? Although now I'm wondering, why did it die? And I will look at it after. But I don't control that. That is beyond my control. And so I can deal with it as I can in the moment, based on the level of skills, based on the level of knowledge I have today. And that is what I can do. And that's what I'm supposed to do. I think we maybe it's high expectations, or I don't, it could be something else, but we set these like levels of perfectionism in our journey, right? And like, this is what it's supposed to look. Well, maybe this is what it's supposed to look like. Maybe this is supposed to be a demonstration of what could happen during struggle, but what also are the possibilities of allowing yourself to go through that as part of the journey and not letting it distract you, or even not believing that it has moved you off of the path to success,
Right.
but that it is part of the path to success. And if I deal with this and I come up with a different solution, that is what I was supposed to do today, instead of feeling like, oh, this is not going to be as good of a show because now I'm on my phone, and at some point my arm is going to get really tired because I'm holding my phone. But it's all good. This is how it's supposed to be. This was meant to happen. And again, even if I don't understand in this moment why this was supposed to happen, it was supposed to happen. And being able to have that faith that I'm still going where I am meant to go, I think is a huge part of finding meaning in the struggle.
Yeah. It's not a matter of a limited amount of resources. It's being resourceful. And there are many times when I was given a task to find, and actually it was a major challenge because it couldn't be found or couldn't be negotiated. And I didn't know that it couldn't be negotiated, and I didn't know that it couldn't be found. And I found it and I negotiated it. I recall working for a company, and the owner always did the negotiation on a certain material. And I was a project manager for a company for a few years, and they did all the negotiation on. And I said, "Do you mind if I give this?" He said, "I get the best price, and these people will not budge." And I came back on more than a dozen occasions and came back at a lower price. And he goes, "How did you get that?" And I said, "I just talked to them." And so from then there forward, I became that negotiator, and I was able to negotiate prices. And I developed a relationship with people through that. And then there was another wannabe that was coming up, and they were going to be groomed to take over that portion of what I did. And they were making the phone calls. And those reps would call me and say, "Who is this person? Because he thinks he's going to get a good price. And I just want you to know our price with you is with you." And we were working for the same company. Now, see, this was the relationship thing that I built. And it was through that and knowing and having that relationship, and also communicating that. And it was that struggle of giving a task that I wasn't supposed to really succeed in that area. And I overcame that. And I want to say, this is one of the things that we see Thomas Edison do. What he saw was failure was just the opportunity. And how many more things did he learn through the thousands of perceived failures, but they just were things that just weren't there yet. Uh-huh. And rather than say, how can I? It's changing it to a statement, how I can. Mm-hmm. And because this is what we do. We say, how can I possibly live another day? My son would say it all the time when he was growing. "This is the worst day of my life." And I said, "Oh, son, there's going to be even better."
You don't even know.
At 7, "This is the worst day of my life." So,
well, I think that you make an interesting point too, especially with the negotiation example. Because in my experience, I also had a CEO who did like all of the negotiating. And at one point she said to me, "You are not good at negotiating, so I'm going to teach you how to negotiate." I'm like, "Okay, yeah, I'm open to learning new things." What I learned in that process is the way she negotiates is to win. And the way I negotiate is based on relationship. And so while, yes, there was value in the struggle of me going through her way of negotiating, it feels like a different kind of struggle, because then I felt like I was thrust into someone else's way to do it, and I'm supposed to do it this way, and I wouldn't do it that way. And so when we talk about like the gifts that come from struggle, I think the gifts often come from when we are finding our way, and we have to find our way, right? We aren't given a map when we're born. We have to find our way. Right. But there's also distractions that other people throw in there that are like, "You should go this way." But I think if we're paying attention to ourselves, we can feel that it's not our way and it's not our struggle. That struggle's not meant for us. That's something someone external has thrown on us that I can actually just opt out of. I can not experience that struggle because it's not mine. And that was something that was coming up for me when you were sharing about that. Because even too, right, like someone new coming up under you, you might say like, "Okay, well, I've built these relationships, so now I'm going to teach this guy to build relationships the way I build relationships." Mm-hmm. Except someone else doesn't build relationships the way you build relationships. And so then that's also thrusting someone else into your struggle and your way of getting out of it, instead of letting them be in their struggle and helping them through their version of it, which I think is something that's like very common. It's something I see a lot from a like marketing perspective, right? Because people will be like, "This is how I do it, and this is how you can do it." And it seems simple, but now really what we're saying is that my struggle is your struggle, and that's not necessarily true.
Yeah, one of the things about um, finding meaning in the struggle, it's I had a thought that came to my mind, how I can stop comparing myself to other people. And when I say that, how I can stop comparing myself instead of how am I comparing myself to other people, and that creates a different dynamic in our mind. But how I can stop comparing myself to other people is by looking at all the elements of where they started from, where they came from. Is the glass half empty or is it half full? And I always say it depends where it started from. So, if you have a glass that only has that much water in it, but it started empty, then do you negate the success that that glass has been able to hold that amount of water since it held nothing before? And your life, your successes, if you compare yourself starting out to someone that's been there for 10 years, you're going to see minimalism. You're going to see this mindset of I'm not enough, scarcity. You're going to see imposter syndrome. And one of the things that that I heard recently is that the greater our success, the more we need others. The greater our success, the more scarcity comes to our mind, because sometimes we can't handle the success that we once dreamed of unless we have a team. And what happens is we can build an organization and it goes so well, and now we think that we can't continue to go on because it's based on us. It depends on us. And this is where that imposter syndrome really comes in. And I really thought that it was a great point that was being brought, because it's easy when we're starting out. Let's just take Steve Jobs for an example. When Steve was started in a garage with Steve Wanazak, or I'm probably saying his name wrong, but anyway, they started in a garage. It was just the two of them. They were buddies. They were building this, and as the company grew, they fired Steve, the originator of Apple. And what they did was they got rid of his attitude, and when he came back with such a greater level of creativity. And he brought the company up. And as we see this, the guy who started the company gets fired. How does that happen? But Steve said it was the best thing that happened, because it allowed him to become once again creative and get out of his own mind. And I think this is where we find meaning in the struggle. We find opportunities out of the obstacles. We create the platform out of having the foundation pulled from under us. And that's where strength is developed, in the quiet, in the dark, by ourselves. And this is one of the things that we see with Rocky. He isolates himself and he goes into this serious training in the second, third, and fourth, and 17th Rocky movie, right? And even as an older gentleman, he comes out, and he's fighting Tommy, Rocky 17. Anyway, but what he shows us is that there is still something in reserve if we don't give in to that fear, that scarcity.
Well, and I think the example about Steve Jobs is interesting too, because most people would think, because humans are very good at linear thinking, that the process of becoming the best CEO for Apple wouldn't include getting fired.
Yeah.
Okay. except for him, it did, right? In order for him to get back to his creativity and back to his why, it took that. And so now, like, and look what it did for the company, like not just for him and his like personal brand, but for the company. That was actually a more effective trajectory for him to reach his potential in that role. And most of the people who I know who have been very successful have not had a linear trajectory of success, right? Where you just have this like upward tick of success the entire time you go. Right? People have failures, people lose sight of things, they get burnt out, they get overwhelmed, and it's more like a roller coaster. Like if you look at a roller coaster, it's all twisty and turny, and there's parts that flip you upside down, and then you're going backwards, right? Like we assume that that is wrong, that it's supposed to be linear. But if we accept that the journey is twisted and sometimes we don't know when we're going to take that bank turn, but that was actually like the coolest part of the ride, right, then we miss out on this potential for our struggles to turn into meaning. And because we have assumed a trajectory that is inaccurate.
Yeah, life is not linear, it's organic. And rather than see it as being buried, see it as being planted, and seeing it as growing in the dark, and it's wet and it's dark and it's icky. But once you break forward, this is where we see people. We see people, we'll hear this thing all the time that they're an overnight success. No, they're not. There's no such thing. Overnight success, just because you saw it today, didn't mean that it wasn't in the making over the last 10 years.
My favorite quote is Mel Robbins being like, it took me 10 years to become an overnight success.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. It's like the bamboo. The bamboo shoots up. It takes 5 years before it breaks through. But once it grows 5 feet in a day. And my understanding is bamboo is hard to get rid of. Like it'll grow everywhere and it'll take over. But that's another story. But what the idea behind how I can versus how can I, it just changes. It changes everything.
It takes it from a question. So you like questioning yourself. And like, honestly, I would say that how can I is better than I can't, right? So maybe there's a progression we move through there. But when you change it to how I can, now that's a statement. You're not questioning whether or not you can anymore. You are stating how you can. And that allows us to put our imagination into the future of possibility instead of the future of questioning. And just like I think a lot of us understand this concept of like the things we spend our thoughts on are the things that become so. If we put our minds into the like how I can, there's not a question anymore. I have this, even if you're only starting with the words and use the words to drive your belief, it creates a different level of commitment instead of like asking and brainstorming and like, oh, I could do this, right? But how many of us have been in brainstorming scenarios where we're like, well, I could do that, or I could do that, and then we end up doing none of the things, right? Like lots of us, if not all of us, at one point or another anyway, versus like how I can make this easier. I have some stuff going on with my grandma, and there's like a lot of healthcare stuff that we need to do. And so my question, how I can get her the level of care she needs, well, one thing I can do is talk to the care team. Right? Let's talk to the care team, and then we'll see how it goes. And then once I have talked to the care team, then I have more knowledge, more ideas about how I can do the next thing. but it's a process, it's a journey. And if we try, I think it's important to have the goal in mind. And like in this scenario, right? And these are the interesting things. Goals, I think smart goals, well, I don't know. Maybe they have their place still, I'm not sure. But like the concept of a hard, tangible, time-stamped goal from the perspective of I'm going to get my grandma the care she deserves. I don't know when that is going to manifest, right? But I do have the intention, right? So my intention going into these conversations is to get her the best care that I can. So this is how I can get her the best care. I can talk to the care team. That's step one. And then there's step 2 and step 3 and step 4, but I don't know what they are yet because I haven't done step 1. So I need to do step 1. That's part of the journey. There's probably struggle in that step, but I'm going to learn from the struggle of that step, and it's going to be able to inform the additional struggles down the line that are inevitably going to happen, not because I'm resigned to them happening, but because I don't control the world.
Right.
So I am enabling myself through each of those steps. I am enabling myself towards success. And again, I may not know precisely, like, again, if I was going to look at the journey of Tracy on a map, I probably, like, I can't pinpoint where I am on the journey through Middle Earth, right? But I know I'm on the path. I'm very confident I'm on the path. And I'm where I'm supposed to be on the path. Not supposed to be farther ahead on the path. I'm not supposed to be farther behind. I'm right where I'm supposed to be, which is also different than like where you are on your path at whatever given time you might be watching this show. Okay?
Right.
Our paths are not the same. Our struggles are not the same. Our meaning is not the same. What I find meaning from isn't the same as what everybody finds meaning from. And this is why it's so important to embrace your journey and to just keep going on it.
Yeah, it is enjoying and having joy and satisfaction along in the journey, not just in the destination.
Right. Well, and it's even interesting when you think about that. So I volunteer locally with an organization called SIYS, which stands for Struggle is Your Success. And the whole concept of the program, it's a youth entrepreneurship development program that helps underprivileged kids find new opportunities, not because they haven't had struggle, but because they have.
Right.
How do you take that struggle and you turn it into something? How do you harness it for passion? How do you use it for learning and all of these types of things? And it's so wonderful to watch these youth who have more malleable brains than us as adults learn that the struggle is part of their success. But owning that journey of saying, like, this was meant for me, right? This struggle was meant for me, and it hasn't ruined where I'm going. It has created where I am going, and it has created. You look at some of these kind of quote unquote self-help gurus, the Tony Robbins, the Mel Robbins, the Brené Browns, and things of the world. What they have learned and what they are now teaching the world was gifted to them through their struggles.
Exactly.
And this is an opportunity that every single one of us has, not because our struggle is the same as someone else's, but that our struggle was meant for us and it's teaching us something. And if we can pay attention to what it's teaching us, that moves us towards our, I don't even want to talk about it as a destination, right? The only destination is death, but like it moves us towards our highest potential. And it's not because we didn't have that, like the struggle isn't preventing us from reaching our potential. It is enabling us. It's, or very minimally, it's creating for us an opportunity to be enabled to move towards our highest potential, or so I believe, anyways.
Yeah, and here again, it is all these people. We've seen their example, and if we went back and we could actually experience that, which we are, It's part of that journey. And it's the order of the words that we put them in. And this is what I'd like to close with. It's the meaning that we give to something. So let's take those three words. How can I versus how I can. Now, let's take three words in another text. Everybody knows the story about, Johnny and his dog. So one day the dog bit Johnny. Now that has a meaning. But now what if we say Johnny bit the dog? We just changed that. It gives it a totally different meaning. And we're worried about Johnny's parents, because if Johnny's biting dogs, they're going to have trouble.
I mean, there's some questions to be asked, very minimally.
So the idea of how can I versus how I can, if we ask that in a statement, how I can.
Also, that's not how Stanley can or how Tracy can, but how I can.
That's right. That's right.
The question ask.
Yeah. So, appreciate your journey, appreciate where you are, enjoy the journey. Don't just look to the destination, because so many people, they get to that thing that they thought was going to bring them all the anticipation, all the joy. They get there and they go, is this it? Is that all there is? Because they didn't enjoy the journey along the way. So that's my thought.
I just would like to add, enjoying the journey as a whole does not mean that you enjoyed every single moment of the journey.
Right.
Okay? It's if I stub my toe, I'm probably not enjoying that specific moment of the journey, but that does not mean as a whole I don't enjoy my journey. So I think that is also an important thing to note, that if you happen to be in a part of your journey where you're like, I am not enjoying this journey, that doesn't mean, one, that there haven't been parts of the journey that you haven't enjoyed, and two, that there aren't parts to come that will be enjoyable. But if we do get stuck in this mindset of the journey is not enjoyable, I think I read at some point, I'm probably going to get the numbers wrong, but something in the realm of our brains can process 400 words a minute or something like that, but we think at 4,000 words a minute or something ridiculous. There's way more thoughts that go through our brain than we can consciously process.
Yes.
And in that stream of thoughts, there are good things, there are bad things, there are indifferent things, there are stressful things, there are happy things. That's a lot. That's a lot of content flowing past you, right? Imagine you're scrolling. That's a lot of content. Our mindset is like the claw hand in that game that picks up the toys, right? There's a whole bunch of things, and it's just picking and choosing. It's not holistic. And so our mindset is deciding what gets through our filter into conscious thought and what doesn't get through our filter. But it doesn't necessarily mean that your brain isn't processing joyous thoughts, right? So today, if what's getting through your filter isn't enjoying the journey, that doesn't actually mean that you're not having experiences of enjoying the journey. So this is the power in being able to reframe that filter to say oh, how am I? Or how I am, to make it a statement, how I am enjoying my journey.
Yeah.
Well, then your brain just might be able to pick out some things that you are enjoying.
Exactly. I think that's a great way to bring this to a close, and the encouragement and the empowerment for others as they're listening, that, creating a stronger future for yourself, your way, in collaboration with others, because we need others. And then it is processing that and enjoying that process and finding a new meaning into the things that are happening for us, not just to us. So until we meet again, have an outstanding weekend, and I will see you next week for another episode of Stronger Futures Project.